This is the Power of Genetics podcast, the podcast designed to help visionary practitioners build a more successful practice, transform more lives, and lead their patients into the future of personalized health. In each episode, I'll interview successful practitioners and leading thought leaders who will share their insights and expertise to help you prepare your practice for what lies ahead. I'm your host, Dr. Yael Jaffe, and now, let's get into today's episode. So today I'd like to welcome Dr. Peter Osborne, who has been extremely well known in the world of gluten. But before we carry on, I'm actually going to ask Dr. Osborne to introduce himself. I'm sure he'll do a job better than I'm able to do.
Well, thanks for having me. Yeah, I'm a chiropractor by trade. I'm a diplomate with the American Clinical Board of Nutrition. And a big part of my background was just really graduating and finding my way in functional medicine. So I've been in practice for 20 years. I founded a foundation called Gluten-Free Society to help spread the word about gluten to people who were dying with autoimmune disease and not getting answers. And went on later to write a book called No Grain, No Pain. It's been featured as a PBS show, been featured on Netflix, Fox. We've been all over the world, New York Post, Business Insider, been featured in a number of major media channels and outlets. But more than anything, I find myself very happy in private practice, taking care of individuals in one-on-one relationships. So that's kind of me in a nutshell.
Thanks. That's a great start. So what I'm always trying to understand when I meet extraordinary functional medicine practitioners like yourself is really about the journey, because it's very seldom I meet a functional medicine practitioner who hasn't had some kind of aha moment, some epiphany, some pivot, some story, either through their own health challenges or someone in their family or something that's happened. So if you don't mind sharing that with us, what led you into this journey, into the gluten story, into the work that you do? If you can just give us a little bit of that kind of background.
Sure. I was training in the VA hospital in rheumatology. Actually, it was part of my training and in graduate school. And I was very frustrated because I'm a veteran of the Air Force. And so in the VA hospital, you're treating veterans every day, right? And these people, made the biggest sacrifice for their country, and they've got sick over it, or they were sick as a result of something they'd been exposed to in life. And so here we were seeing patients with rheumatoid arthritis and lupus and scleroderma and ankylosing spondylitis, psoriatic arthritis, you name it, right? We looked at autoimmune disease as a rule of thumb. And the day I got to this internship, they handed me a book. My attending physicians handed me a book and said, you need to read it. You need to know it. Don't come back without reading it or knowing it. So I did. I'm a reader. I'm a student. So I highlighted a lot of different things. The book was called The Primer on Rheumatological Disease. And so I come back, the next day, and several days after that, and here what I see is this pattern of prescribing methotrexate, which is a cancer drug for pain, this pattern of giving steroids, this pattern of giving non-steroidal anti-inflammatories, drugs like hydroxychloroquine for pain, for rheumatological pain. And this pattern of when that fails, the surgeons come in to do their consult on Wednesdays. And so these people that have been being drugged for years, their joint still failed, their pain is still there. And now that surgeons want to come in and do a full replacement of the joint, knee replacement surgeries, et cetera, right? And I never understood why we would sit by idly watching these people be drugged out of their minds to control their pain when it didn't really control their pain, and it really didn't lead to better outcomes. And what it really led to was a surgical intervention that failed because these people were so destroyed by the drugs, years of the drugs, that they couldn't recover from the surgery. So it made no sense to even do the surgery. And nobody was talking about diet or lifestyle or nutrition, even though the book they gave me to read, The Primer on Rheumatological Disease, made note of diet and lifestyle and nutrition, particularly and I kept asking, well, what causes rheumatoid arthritis? What causes ankylosing spondylitis? And my attending physicians would say, well, we don't know. And I'm like, well, the book you gave me says otherwise. The book you gave me says that these are triggers, right? So we know that infection is a trigger. We know that nutritional deficit's a trigger. We know that gluten can be a trigger. As a matter of fact, there's tons of research on gluten and celiac disease and rheumatoid arthritis, right? This crossover. And so why aren't we doing that? Why aren't we testing these people to see whether or not diet might have an impact? And I was told that that's ridiculous. Then I'm like, why did you make me read the book? It's not ridiculous. It's not even my idea. Like it's not even my original thought, right? So anyway, I went to the library. I was in Houston, so the Jesse Jones Medical Library. This was before computers, where you could just go, to the National Library of Medicine and pull anything you wanted to pull. I had to actually go through dusty archives of old journals in print, right? And I had to pull this research, right? Remember microfiche, those machines you go and you find, and then you go pull the book, and right. And so here I was pulling all this research. I bring in stacks of literature on juvenile rheumatoid arthritis and fasting and gluten-free diets actually being beneficial. And I'm like, okay, this is not me, just some young green doctor trying to, change the world. This is your colleagues and your peers actually doing research that says you should be looking at these things, and you're not. And that's frustrating to me, because these people need more respect than what they're getting. They need better outcomes than what they're getting. And I was promptly told to be quiet and to behave. Yeah. And so then I went back to the library and I pulled research on fasting. And I showed, research that, fasting for 48 hours could diminish pain dramatically in these individuals. And then I brought more research on fish oil and how fish oil could be used as an alternative to non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs and was equally effective. And I was, again, I just kept getting dissuade from trying to do anything different. So I left the hospital, the VA hospital. I won't say disgruntled, just disappointed, right? And so one of my first private practice patients was a little girl named Ginger. And I wrote about her in my book, No Grain, No Pain. But Ginger, at the age of 2, was diagnosed with juvenile rheumatoid arthritis. And, her knees would swell up so severely she couldn't crawl or walk the way other kids started to crawl and progress to walking. So she was really at a disadvantage. But from the age of 2 to the age of 9, she was medicated with methotrexate. She had a port embedded in her arm, so she was in and out of the hospital so frequently for pain management. And at 9 years of age, the doctor looked at this little girl's mom and said, "You need to go home and get your affairs in order. There's nothing more we can do. She's probably got 6 months to live." Now imagine that, being a parent. Imagine trusting that doctor to care for your child, right? And to do the right thing, and miserably failing at it, and now telling you, go dig a hole and get a tombstone created. What a tragedy, right? So this little girl had gluten sensitivity, and that was the very first test I ran on her. We ran, the genetics of gluten, and we found that was positive. Within 6 months, she had the port out of her arm, so she wasn't dead, right? And within a year, she was in total remission off all medication. And today, she's graduated college, and she's, out there in the world doing great things, all because we changed her diet, all because we asked a different set of questions. Right. And it wasn't a leap, and it wasn't even it wasn't my original idea. I can't take credit for it, but I can take credit for being, we'll just say, tenacious at wanting people to get better and not accepting the status quo of drug you into poor health and then do surgery. That to me was terrible. So I knew at that time, after watching Ginger, over that year, I watched her get better, and then I watched her thrive. I knew that this had to be in the public eye. Like, we had to get this message out there. And that's when I founded Gluten-Free Society. And that's why I did it. It was a free, I built it, coded. I learned how to code, this is how I, most people won't go that far, but I did. I learned how to code HTML to build this website, to get this information up so that the world could understand that the power of diet change could literally save a life. And knowing that we have 46 million cases of autoimmune disease just in the US, I knew that many of those people, are dying, right? They're being drugged, they're being medicated into other illnesses. Many of the drugs today, like your not just your disease modifying anti-rheumatic drugs, but also your biologics, which cause cancer and destroy health in other ways. Those aren't solutions, right? They're not solutions at all. They're myths. And anyway, I knew I needed to reach people in that way. So I started and founded Gluten-Free Society, and that's just been what has driven me ever since.
Yeah, it's an amazing story. I mean, the sad thing is how many doctors are still not listening. So just a personal story that actually happened last week is my mother's closest friend. We had lunch and she's got rheumatoid arthritis and was telling me that she had gone to a specialist, a rheumatologist, and she had gone to a new rheumatologist because she was in pain all the time. And she would wake up in the morning, take pain medication, go back to bed for 2 hours until she was actually able to get out of bed. And when she went to the rheumatologist, she was told, your blood tests are fine, so you're fine. That was her answer. And I said to her, like, how much of your life are you in pain? She said, 80%. I said, 80% you're in pain? And the rheumatologist is telling you fine? Like, there's still this crazy insanity going out. And I was like, wait, we really need to get you to a functional integrative practitioner. And of course we did. And the first thing I did was remove gluten. The first thing. And this is years and years and years of being treated by rheumatologists. So, I mean, your story just resonates. And unfortunately, there's still a lot of education to be done. But I mean, I love the fact that, you talk about, we don't necessarily have to do the research ourselves. Sometimes it's just about being the messenger and having a voice and reaching out. And I think that really brings me to another question. So for others like you who find something that really is a major kind of health concern, a real crisis that's happening in our allopathic medicine, have a message. What are the greatest challenges you experienced in trying to break through? I mean, obviously you left the VA, but what are some of the challenges that others like you will experience when they're trying to get a message out?
I think the biggest challenge practitioners are going to experience is they get in their own way.
Interesting.
I don't think the world is not the challenge. The world is not the hurdle. Society is not the hurdle. The practitioner is their own hurdle. And so what I mean by that is many practitioners have this glorious education, right? This wonderful message, this wonderful story, if you will, maybe similar to mine. Maybe it was instead of somebody else they knew that was sick, maybe they overcame their own health struggle, right? So they have this wonderful story of transformation, which is fairly true of most functional practitioners. Most people get into it. It's a passion project because something else failed them. And the reason why is that society doesn't teach functional. Society doesn't teach anymore. They don't teach work for reward. Society teaches instant reward, instant gratification through pharmacy. And that it's a pipe dream, right? And so practitioners, once they realize that pipe dream is smoke and mirrors, then they find this way to functional. And then they get in their own way. Either they have what's called oftentimes impostor syndrome, where they think they can't become the expert. And so they don't feel like they can get on a stage with somebody like myself, as an example, which, when I declared my expertise in this area, I didn't get permission from anyone. Yeah. It actually was a strategy. The strategy that I knew I needed was I had to be on the same footing, because I'm a chiropractor, right? And people look at chiropractors as, the quack chiropractor, right? The alternative weirdos, right? I understand that. And I know where I come from, and I know where people's minds are. Not that everybody thinks that, but again, if we're talking about the masses, the broader. So I knew I had to overcome that objection. And so I didn't have a problem with trying to strategically think that out. So here's what I did. I called Dr. Alessio Fasano, world leading expert, discoverer of leaky gut, now at Harvard, right? And, we were speaking on the same stage, and I said, look, I want to donate money to your foundation because I believe in what you're doing. And I think that research is very important, but I'd also like to get an interview with you. And he very, very gracefully accepted. And so I was able to be on the same stage with him in a one-on-one conversation where I could showcase him and his knowledge, but I could also showcase myself. Right? Because as a chiropractor, we went toe to toe in scientific speak. And that if you're passionate about something and you really understand the subject well, you should never have imposter syndrome if you truly did your homework. So strategically, I called him. I got an interview with him. I invited him out to speak. I put on an event called Glutenology. And this was an event, and I did it in the Med Center in Houston. And I strategically thought that out too, because the Med Center is where things happen. And Houston is one of the biggest, most important med centers in the world, right? If we look at like MD Anderson and all the hospital complexes. So I held this conference there, and I invited Dr. Fasano. I invited Mrs. United States at the time. Her name was Shannon Ford, and her platform was celiac disease and gluten sensitivity, because I knew she would bring in people. And I knew that if we were on the same stage together, that, you know, speaking from the standpoint of expertise, when you surround yourself by other people who are viewed by the population as experts, you become an expert, right? So this was my original strategy, was to create an event. We had thousands of people come. We had Mrs. United States. We had Dr. Fasano. I taught 2 physicians before the event started that morning. I actually taught a master class on the science behind gluten sensitivity. And we had like 50 physicians, GI doctors, medical doctors, family practitioners come and pay money to learn more about gluten sensitivity. And so that was really, I would say that event was the springboard by which I overcame any degree of imposter syndrome and thrusted myself into the light with other experts, researchers who were also considered to be, you know, part of the leading mind or the leading edge in the realm of gluten.
I really love your story, and the reason I'm smiling so much, though you can't hear me smiling, is that I have a slightly similar story. I was a dietitian who had been working in nutrigenomics for years. I was really nothing. I was no one. I was one of the few dietitians who cared about nutrigenomics. This is in 2000, before it was spoken about. And I had been a huge follower of Dr. Ruth DeBusk, and she was my mentor. She was my, you know, she wrote the first book on nutrigenomics, and I arrived in the USA with this South African dietetics degree. And I phoned her up and I said, you know, I've been following you. You wrote this book. I've been working in this space. I have an idea for a book. Please, will you meet with me? I'd like to write a book with you. And being the kind and kind of generous and humble person she is, she agreed to it and wrote the book with her. And like your event was your kind of pivot moment, that writing the book with Ruth was the same, because I went from being no one, totally unknown, and then suddenly having my name on the book with the number one person who was the number one person in nutrigenomics suddenly gave me a platform. And I think, you know, to speak to people often say to me, and I'm sure you get this, like, how did you get so lucky to be an expert in nutrigenomics? And I'm like, it wasn't actually luck. And I love that you speak to strategy. It was like you really thought it through. You're like, I need to align myself with the experts in the field. I need to find myself a platform to speak out. So I know I'm kind of smiling a lot, but it just speaks so much to that drive to say, I have a message, I need to share it, and I need to find a place. So I'm going to ask for some more examples. When I look at what you've done, whether it's Netflix, it's radio stations, it's writing the book, it's the symposium that you've done, there's so much impact. And whenever I meet functional medicine real like influencers, I always look for, how did you build such an impact? So you've given me a fantastic example. I wonder if you can just think a little bit more that we can share with others of what other things they can do to really put themselves out there and find a platform in the way that you've done.
I mean, that really speaks to, it's not like one thing, or not like one, like, we'll just say it's not one strategy. It's not like one thing you can do, because success doesn't work that way. I would say the first thing that you really should think about if you want to reach more people with your powerful message is think about your message. You know, so many people do it backwards. They put the cart before the horse. They haven't really clearly defined their message, clearly defined their mission, their goals. And so they don't have a roadmap to know where they're going. And so then they just kind of meander through the day to day, right? They don't have a plan. There's no strategy. Strategy has to be underlying what you're trying to do. So for me, what was that? That was, I sat down and I said, what's my reason? Like, what's my big why? Why am I doing what I'm doing, right? And so I said, okay, Why? Because veterans are dying. Okay. But veterans aren't the only ones that are dying. People with autoimmune disease, it's, if we were to gather all of the different forms of autoimmune disease and cluster them the way we do cancer and heart disease, autoimmune disease would trump cancer and heart disease, number one cause of death, right? So people are dying to get this information. And what are you going to do about it? So that's what I asked myself. Okay, 46 million people a year. That's 1 in 7 people in the United States have a disease that they're probably going to die from. The average person with autoimmune disease has a 10-year shorter lifespan and a quality of life that's horrific.
Quality of life, I would say. Absolutely.
Yeah. So how can we change that? Okay, number one is you got to have a platform by which to speak from, but you have to have a clear message. And so our clear message was, we're doing this to save lives. And, we actually have a hashtag, save 100 million lives is my hashtag. And I would encourage any of you to don't dream small, dream big, because, when you dream big, even if you don't hit all your goals, you'll hit far more bigger goals than if you dream small. And that's not to say that you can't be a practitioner and have a private practice and help the people in your community, but dream as big as you can. Right. And so for me, that was 100 million. Right. So we created a platform around saving lives. And so we created our why. Right. And so once we have our why, once you know what your why is and your message is succinct and clear, now you can get granular, because part of success is knowing, what your why is and how you want to get there. But the other part is marketing. And, this is where a lot of practitioners fail, because they don't understand that marketing also is very important. You don't have to be a marketer, but you have to understand that marketing is what gets your message to the masses. And so if you have a why, then you can get the right people on your team. Okay. So for me, it was never about, I need to become an expert marketer. It was more, I knew I needed marketing, right? Strategy, right? So because I knew I needed marketing, I could seek out the people who understood marketing, and I could hire those people, right, to help me refine my message, to help me get it out in front of more people, right? And so when your mission is big, and when your goals and your vision and your why is big, the next step in that process is bringing on the people that are experts in marketing and internet and social media and the things that you don't have time to do as a practitioner, but that need to be done in an effort to really, really reach the masses. And so what I did originally was I made a lot of mistakes, probably like most people who are successful in business. I learned how to code. I should never have learned how to code to build a website. I should have just paid somebody to do it. But at the time, that was what was necessary, for my journey. I had to learn how to do that in order to get to the next level. But that was a lesson I learned. At that point, I knew, okay, I'm no longer going to be my own marketer, and I'm no longer going to be my own coder, right? So you hit a certain level where you bring on this person, you outsource that job, you get this job done, and you make sure that those people are very well aware of your why. Okay. And that the reason why that's important is because when you're bringing on team members, if they don't understand your mission, you might get mediocrity at best out of them, right? You might get, I built this website and it's kind of so out of them, as opposed to, this doctor wants to save 100 million lives. I get to be a part of that. I'm going to do the best job I can do. And one of the first people I brought on, I saved his life. He had celiac disease. He was a web designer. He's a web designer, lived in the Philippines. He was actually from the UK. And I found him through a friend. And anyway, he had celiac disease. He was wasting away to nothing, and I saved his life. He actually saved his life as he was working on my website. And so he did such a brilliant job, right? He did such a brilliant job for me. And so we just started to look for the right people. And it's not that you hunt out sick people who you help and then you get them to work for you, but sometimes that's the way it works, right?
Yeah.
But we just wanted to make sure that we had the right people on the bus. We wanted to make sure that we had the right people who wanted to be on this team and wanted to help us achieve that goal. Because I think most practitioners think they have to handle it all on their own. They have to be the computer expert. They got to know how to vacuum the floor. They got to, they got to do it all, right? And what you have to realize is that all great things, when you think about the greatest projects in mankind's history, they were all done by teams. And those teams always had a huge why, right? And that's what you want to think about. So don't think about how you need to go about learning how to code or doing this thing or doing that thing. Think about why first, then think about who you need to help you accomplish your why,
and
then think about how. And don't do that backwards, because when you do it backwards, you will struggle and struggle and struggle.
Yeah.
Because as one person, you can accomplish great things, but as a team, you can accomplish far more than you ever could by yourself.
Magnificently spoken. Thank you so much. I couldn't have put it better. That's really beautiful. So to end off, I'm going to leave you with my most obvious question. Is obviously my background's in genetics, and that's been my why and my purpose and my career. So I would love to hear your opinion of how do you think genetics is going to impact the work you do? Genetics is going to impact functional medicine. Genetics is going to impact your 100 million that you're reaching out to. Where do you think we are? Where do you think we're going with genetics?
I think we're in a super infant stage. I implore genetics and in gluten sensitivity genes. We test for different alleles associated with celiac and non-celiac gluten sensitivity. I think genetics is an important part of what doctors need to do moving forward. But I think what we're going to find more importantly, even than human genetics, what you inherit from mom and dad, aside from the fact that, you have your 23 chromosomes, you have mitochondrial DNA, and you have microbiome, and that microbiome has DNA.
Also has its own DNA. That's right.
Yeah. And you have a mycobiome, a mold biome, and you have a virobiome, and you have all this, and this is all unexplored territory. And I think what's going to happen with the power of computing and technology is we're going to learn more and more and more about how these things cluster. And I think as we get that power of computing together, I think we're going to be able to personalize people's healthcare more and more and more. I think the future of medicine is personalized. I think ultimately it's first step is it's up to the person to recognize that they have a health issue, as opposed to living with an issue and accepting that as their norm. But once that person reaches that recognition, kind of like an alcoholic, once they realize they have a problem, then they can seek out the help that they need. And I think that's where the combination of functional medicine and technology is really going to help restore faith in medicine. Because today, where is medicine? Medicine, we've got, if we look at modern medicine, right, we've got 70 years of some good things, right? Antibiotic, arguably one of the greatest discoveries of all time, has saved hundreds and hundreds of millions of lives. No argument there. But the vast majority of medicines,
chronic medicine, definitely.
Yeah, for chronic disease. I mean, I'm not talking about emergency medicine. Chronic
medicine.
Diseases, they don't work, and the outcomes are poor. And we spend $3 trillion a year on healthcare, and the outcome is we have more heart disease, more cancer, more diabetes, more obesity, more autoimmune disease.
It's not getting better.
It's not getting better. And I think where medicine is it's starting. Honestly, people are starting to see that there's a distrust that's developing. I mean, just look at what's happening in the world right now with COVID, and not that we're going to get into all that, but I mean, the vaccine travesty, this experiment that's being injected on so many people, and there's so many people that won't do it because there's a distrust, and that level of distrust is growing because we've given the medical community our complete trust for so long, right? And they failed us. They've honestly just failed us. And so I think medicine in its traditional form is in its death throes. And I think that's why you're seeing so much aggression that's coming out now. Is what happens when something is dying is I don't know if you've ever lived on a farm.
They hold on tighter.
Yeah, they hold on tighter and they squirm a lot. And that leads to a lot of side effect and ripples. And I think that's where we're at. I hope that's where we're at. I really hope we're seeing a transformation in the way the world views health and wellness, and the way the world views pursuing health and wellness.
Well, I think that's a great way to end, and something for hopefully that's we can look forward to. I do think there's a huge transition coming. I think there is a awakening that's individuals are taking more responsibility for their decisions around their own health, and hopefully that's when they start seeking out practitioners like yourself and the amazing work that you're doing. So thank you so much for sharing. Very inspirational journey, and I look forward to following your work for many, many more years. So thank you very much, Dr. Osborne.
Well, you're welcome. Thank you so much for having me as a guest.
Thank you for listening to the Power of Genetics podcast, brought to you by 3x4 Genetics. For more episodes, please visit 3x4genetics.com/podcast. And if you are a licensed health practitioner who would like to apply to join our network of over 1,000 like-minded visionary practitioners, please visit 3x4genetics.com/apply.